Welcome to the Living Yoga Podcast. My name is Darren, and many of you know me through this podcast, but you may have also read my book, Yoga and the Path of the Urban Mystic. It's no mystery, even if you just started yoga, that yoga is much more than physical exercise and yoga poses. There's this deep, rich philosophical tradition that I tried to highlight in my book, Yoga and the Path of the Urban Mystic. And when I find a fellow teacher who's doing similar work to me, I jump for joy. And so today's conversation, it was with Kori Hahn. She is a fellow yoga teacher and author, and she has a new book called Rituals of the Soul. And she does a very similar thing that I attempted to do, and that is make the philosophy and practice of yoga that was this ancient, rich tradition, make it relevant to our busy modern lives. And she does a masterful job at that. I had an amazing conversation with her, and I'm excited to share it with you. If you would like to reach out to her, if you would like to get a copy of her book or learn more about her teaching, I have put all of that in the show notes so that you can click right through and get what you need. I've also put a link to my video course, Mindfulness for Busy Minds, and for a limited time, you can take that short video course for free. It's my gift to you, listeners and viewers. So thank you so much for tuning into this podcast. I'm excited to share this conversation with you, and I'm sure you're going to be every bit as inspired as I was when you hear her wisdom. I haven't finished your book, but I've so enjoyed reading it. And it feels very much in alignment with a lot of the things I've been trying to do. Like my Urban Mystic book 20 years ago, it was the same idea of like taking ancient yoga, bringing it into the modern world. And so this is like such an amazing book, and I really want to thank you and encourage people to read it.
I don't even know how that happened, but yes.
Is it an audiobook yet?
So, thank you.
Excellent. Well, let's talk a little bit about you before we dive into the book. You have quite the backstory yourself. First, you're in Sri Lanka right now. I always like to say that because the world got smaller, and I do these interviews. I used to have to do them in person, and now you can be in Sri Lanka, and it's like bedtime there, and I'm just waking up and getting my day started. How did you find yourself in Sri Lanka? I mean, you everything from medicine people, men, women, to surfing, yes, to yoga, to living in Sri Lanka, to Alaska. I mean, it would be hard pinpoint to do your bio in a sentence
I actually
or two.
grew up in Texas.
Why don't you take it and run with it?
After college, found myself not sure where I was going, what I was going to do. I mean, like most people, I think. And a girlfriend called me and said, let's go up to Alaska. So I went up there and ended up falling in love and staying for 12 years. And it's such a seasonal place. I started working for the summers and could travel most of the winters to escape the very long and cold winters. And so I got to know the world that way by just taking these 6 months and taking trips, and went all over and have been traveling for quite a while and really studying theology for most of that. And that definitely led me to yoga and to India many times. And it took a while to absorb everything that was going on there. And after 12 years in Alaska, I just felt like it wasn't where I belonged anymore. I was in a relationship that felt a bit stale, and I wasn't content with everything I had been doing. And so I just took another walkabout, essentially. And I knew I wanted to learn to surf. I had been craving it and drawing it in my journal. And then finally, 4 months later, I went and flipped through my journal and was like, oh, I really want to go and do this. So I thought that Sri Lanka would be the perfect place because I've always loved going to India and studying yoga, like so many of us dedicated yogis. But Sri Lanka's similar, but they had surf. So I ended up here. And I actually left and went to Bali for a few years and ended up meeting someone and having a baby, and then decided to come back and actually set roots here. And I knew that Sri Lanka was the place for me. And so I sold my house in Alaska, and I have been here pretty much since right before the pandemic started. So
How are things? If you, I mean, the pandemic is sort of both brought the world closer together because we're all zooming, and it separated us out because we can't travel very easily anymore. How are things? I mean, well, just for those of
yes.
you who aren't geography buffs, Sri Lanka is a little island south of India, and if you're
Yes.
a Hindu deity named Hanuman, you can just sort of leap right over. But if you're not, you probably need to take a boat or a plane. But how are things in Sri Lanka and
Yeah.
in that part of the world? I know India got
It
hit
was really
really
quiet
hard
here, and it was
a
real.
few
There
months
wasn't
back.
much COVID at all, and I think similarly to India until the Delta variant came, and so India got hit really hard, and we had still escaped that for a while. And the government's has been very conservative with strict lockdowns, like many other parts of the world. Not so much, I would say, like the U.S., but like it's more like a house arrest here. Our lockdowns were so. I spent a lot of time sitting at home by myself, like many people, but like no stores were open. I couldn't go to the grocery store but once every 8 days. And then about May, Delta came in with a vengeance,
Wow.
and the country really just had a very full on vaccine program and went full bore. I believe they were like vaccinated the most people. They were the leading vaccination country. I don't know how to say that, but in the world. And so now they're opening up again just now. So we actually, my son and I went and wandered around the States through the past 5 months while all that was happening and enjoyed finally reconnecting. And now we're coming back and you can feel the buzz. Things are coming alive again. And it feels really good to see that after no one's
Yeah.
been working, people are hungry. It's a hard time for the country. And so, yeah, that's what it's been like.
Yeah.
But I do think it's getting better. That's my hope, at least.
Yeah. Um, yeah. Well, it's amazing because, of course, here in the States, we have like a vaccine hesitancy is off the charts. And I don't really understand it personally because I couldn't wait to get my vaccine. But yeah, it's nice to see the results, especially in a smaller country where such
And I'm
adherence
glad
is
that you
possible, and you can see
said
the
that too,
benefits of
because so
that.
many in the
So
wellness
I'm
industry are
glad things are.
not really speaking up about that. And even I have also, and even my platform is, I'm all about autonomy,
Yeah,
but I've been a traveler my whole life, and I know that their economy is based on tourism. And I've sat here and seen all the beach boys who rent surfboards sit at home for 2 years. And so even for me, that was one of the main reasons I was for it as well,
yeah,
is for the bigger picture of this. So I could come back, so people can come back and give these people, a job
yeah,
again. And it was so much more than just this principle of, what's going to happen to my body, or like, it was just like, this is definitely the way forward for the world. And that was my perspective. And
yeah,
it was scary to put that out there being a yoga teacher for sure, but I'm glad we are.
yeah. I did it on this podcast. I did an interview with a friend of mine who's a doctor, and just talking because I hear this all the time from most of the yoga world seems on board with vaccination, but there's a pretty strong segment that is hesitant or downright against getting vaccinated. And I just wanted to like have a really clear, honest conversation. I'm not a big fan of big pharma and taking lots of drugs when you don't need it, but I also think there's a place for everything. And so I interviewed her, and I've done a lot of weird stuff in my life. I have never gotten as much hate mail. I mean, visceral hate mail as I did from that one interview. And it was interesting to see people who I think are generally pretty woke using anti-gay slurs. I'm a gay man, and
Trigger.
Stuff that I'm like, wow, I'm used to that in
Yes.
certain areas, but not
Yeah.
from my people. Anyway, let's talk about
Yes.
something a little more cheery than a global pandemic and hate mail. Hopefully, I won't get any hate mail from this
Oh,
interview.
thank
I
you.
suspect I will not because you're very likable. So let's talk about your book. And the thing I like about your book, I mean, there's so much I like about your book. I like the way it weaves in yoga not just as a fitness thing or as a stress management thing, but as a ritual, as a holistic practice that gets woven into many facets of your day-to-day life. And I was thinking as I was reading through it, it's like we ritualize so much in our life, getting up and brushing our teeth, going to bed,
Yes.
making our coffee or tea or whatever it is you do. We ritualize all these things, and yet we have such a hard time ritualizing not just the rolling out of your yoga mat, but the
Creatures of
yogic
habit.
lifestyle,
Absolutely. Yeah.
whatever that is. So I'd love, yeah, habit can dominate us or it can be a tool that we use. And I think you do a masterful job at helping people to understand that habit is not inherently bad. It can be an ally if it's used properly. So maybe you could talk a little bit about what you personally mean by ritual. I mean, I think different people use that in different ways, and how you apply it to the practice and philosophy
Great.
of yoga
Let's
broadly,
do that.
and then we'll dive into the
And thank
specifics.
you. I just love you. You just keep throwing compliments this way. I'm just like, let's make this interview 2 hours, please.
Ego.
Perfect.
My goal is
What
to have your
happens
ego
after that?
explode all
Usually
over
it
your
busts.
webcam.
It pops, so we're all in the right direction anyways. But I believe that yoga is an 8-step ladder to get us somewhere. And really we can learn to listen to our intuition, to learn what we truly want and make a plan to get there. And that's what the rituals are all about, is making that plan for us. And, rituals and habit are actually scientifically proven. It's called neurolinguistic programming. And we create these ravines and they can become as big and grand as the Grand Canyon if we do them our whole lives. And so things like how we relate with others and relationships are very deep ingrained channels like that. And so, as most of us know through our life, as we find struggles and you're like, why am I doing this? And it's unconscious. We do so many unconscious things. So to me, the rituals have been so helpful. One, for being a busy modern day woman who runs a business, has a child, does all these things. For years, I shamed myself when I didn't make it to the yoga mat for 1 hour and when I didn't do my Vipassana practice or I didn't do, and I just had so much guilt. There was no compassion. There was no loving kindness there. It was just like, this is your path. And if you want to get anywhere, you better do it. Like, And so then I don't know when it happened, but somewhere along the line, I realized, well, actually, I do think I know when it happened. I went to a monastery here, even during the beginning of the pandemic, and said, I really need to meditate. I meditate every year for a year, because that really gets me going and it kind of reinstates my meditation practice. And the monk said, well, you've been doing this a lot of years, just escaping your kid, escaping your house, coming over here, trying to sit and meditate. And he was like, the whole point's to do this in your life. I'm not going to let you come and sit here. And I was like, I just got rejected to come and sit in a monastery by a monk. This seems so unreal to me, because they're usually trying to get you in the door, like to help you, right? Mm-hmm. This is the path. And so I came home, I started looking at it very differently, even just my meditation practice. And I started saying, okay, I'm going to do 5 10-minute sessions. And then I looked at it differently the next week and I said, okay, I'm just going to do 15 breaths. As often as I think of it, I'm going to just pull in 15 mindfulness breaths as often as I can. And I started realizing that by doing that, I was creating moments of meditation and I felt accomplished, but I also felt grounded and calm because I was creating 10 moments of calm in my day rather than beating myself up about not making that hour happen. So there was a completely different dynamic going on by me. I learned to just relax the practice, or my diligence with the practice. And I think that could only happen definitely because I've been practicing so diligently for so many years. It definitely helps in the beginning to have that stern dedication. I mean, most definitely. But there comes a point that you realize this isn't just supposed to be an hour of our day. This is a guide to the soul. This is something we should be doing all the time. But how do we do that? And so to me, the answer was rituals. However you want to feel, you make those moments happen as often as you can by creating rituals.
Yeah. You know, as you're talking, I say this probably more annoyingly than the number of times I say breathe in, breathe out as a yoga teacher. But we call it a practice, right? We call it a yoga practice when we roll out our mat, or a meditation practice when we sit to meditate. And that does beg the question, what are we practicing for?
Piano.
Right? Like if you're practicing
Yes.
for a play you're going to be in, or the piano, or practicing your sport, or, you know, right, you're getting ready for the race or this competition or this recital or whatever. And I think that remembering that our practice is there to prepare us for the real event, which is life. Right, that day-to-day, raising your child, running your business.
I love that, yes.
Surviving a pandemic, whatever's coming up. And I think that's where your book has really done a beautiful job of helping people who might have a strong yoga practice turn it into a yoga ritual of how you live your life.
Yes, to integrate it into other times. And to use your child. To me, it was very conflicting that I was always trying to find time away from my child to do my practice. That's how I spent so many of the first 2 or 3 years. Yeah. Like, can you watch my kid while I go do this? And then the monk was like, you do it with your kid. And now he knows how to meditate too. And it's just, the whole thing has kind of blown my mind right open. But it is a practice of life. We're not learning. I mean, in essence, we're learning many things. We're learning 8 principles, which as I talk about in the book. And so I do guide the readers to create a ritual for all of the 8 principles, or not all of them, not the yamas and niyamas, but especially the rest of the limbs, you can call them. So mindfulness is one, right? With pranayama. So that's a practice you can do and you can gain a skill from. But ultimately, from the big picture of yoga, we really want to, like I said before, figure out what we need and want for ourselves. We want to listen to our intuition. And when your intuition says something, and the better you get at listening to it, the more fluent you become, you're going to hear something. And that's what the rituals are most important for. And even the other day, I was thinking, like, when am I going to be happy? You know, I've done all this work. I just want more happiness. And then I was thinking, okay, like, you just wrote a book on this. So like, what's the happiest thing you do? And then I thought, when I really stop and I'm with my child, that really does make me happy. When I don't say, I'll be with you in a minute, Kona, I'm going to do this first. But I just take 5 minutes, 5 times a day to just be happy with him, to like love him and watch him be amazing. And suddenly then I have 5 moments of happiness each day, and I can increase that number or decrease it as I need, but to use yoga for that is so profound. And it was such a game changer than merely always focusing on my anxiety with my meditation practice, or like the specifics, like just to have a more vague idea of where I wanted to go and what I wanted my days to look like became a really nice way to look at this.
Have you ever seen, this is an odd non sequitur, but I promise I have a point here. Have you ever seen the movie Click with Adam Sandler?
I don't think so, at least.
You wouldn't think Adam Sandler would come up in a podcast about yoga, but here we go. He basically goes into a Bed Bath & Beyond, and he's frustrated with his, family stuff. It's not terrible, but his kids are just rambunctious and all over, and his wife is always complaining, and it's just like family life, And he goes into a Bed Bath & Beyond, and he basically gets this sort of magic controller like for your TV, but he can use it for his life. And he starts sort of skipping over the uncomfortable parts, like fast forwarding. His wife is telling him to take out the trash or something. He's like, fast forward over it. And what he realizes is that he can't stop, that it becomes addictive. and he starts fast forwarding over the good stuff, the stuff that's pleasant. And all of a sudden he's rushed to the end of his life and he's missed all of it. It's actually got a really beautiful, very yogic point to it. But I think, what you're saying is like being a parent is hard. It's so hard because kids have a way of not cooperating. They're doing things on their clock, not yours. And you're like, I'm trying to get out the door. I'm trying to go teach yoga. I'm trying to be all peaceful. Put on your shoes. And it's so tempting to want to just push that away and make it not spiritual. But that is where your yoga lies. Your yoga happens now. Now the teaching of yoga. And sometimes it ain't pretty.
Yes, to sit with that pain. Yeah. This has been a big year for that.
So watch Click with Adam Sandler. It's very cute.
I like the point of it. It sounds... Because we do that. We just distract ourselves from our whole life. We can. That's an option. Many people are unconsciously choosing. It's just to distract yourself with the future, with anxiety. I mean, anxiety is something I know well. And even that I always find surprising, that yoga means to stop the fluctuations and the ups and downs of our mental state more than the physical and all these other things. And so to really use these practices to stop that, to be in the present moment, to nurture, be with your child, and to do, I think what is cool about this, my book a little bit too, is that it brings in the ideas of trauma and all these other things that we don't talk about so much, or we didn't used to talk about in the yoga world, but it's definitely becoming more popular now. And that we do want to avoid, we often want to avoid our pain. And now that we are learning how much of our unconscious behaviors are coming from that trauma, there's a new, encouragement and motivation to sit with that pain and be with it. And when we do that, we really can learn to emotionally regulate and to be more mindful, to just accept what is and all the change that's happening. And that's such a big part of it, is to learn to that there's crappy parts,
One of the things that I like about your teaching in your book, and that I don't see enough of in the yoga world, is, we say namaste as if it's a magic invocation that gets rid of all of the shadow. And you take something like trauma, whatever the source of the trauma, it tends to make people uncomfortable, like other people uncomfortable, not the person who experienced the trauma, but people around them. Could you please just not talk about that time you were assaulted, or when you were abused as a child, or whatever it happens to be? And it is the looking at with compassionate, loving kindness that is the most healing thing we can do. And yet in the yoga world, we tend to have this, if it's dark, if it's ugly, if it's unattractive, if it's unpleasant, please avoid that. Please don't look at it. Let's just go back to that namaste, the light in me, and yada, yada. And that's good to do that, but it can be very toxic and limiting, because it doesn't give us the space to be human, or to be vulnerable, or to be broken. And to recognize that brokenness is part of our yoga. It is the crux of our yoga.
And the catalyst for making so much change in our own life. I mean, it's really been the dark night of the soul that's helped me to see the light, or to know how strong I am, or to know how powerful, or what I'm grateful for. When everything was cheery for 5 years, I completely got caught up in my ego and all the things I could accomplish, and everything was going so great. I was making so much money, but it's when my husband left me and I was sitting here alone for 2 years that I learned not to be codependent, which was the greatest lesson I could have learned for right now in my life, which gave me my worth back, And I think that if I could do one thing in my life, I just wish I could normalize the darkness that we're all going through all the time. And that's really what Kali embodies, this goddess. And she's just wearing her big, necklace full of skulls. And that's the process. Like, we don't have to shame it. I mean, you don't have to sit on your soapbox like me and write a book about it all, but like, you could definitely talk about it a little bit more, get therapy, like, just know that is the process. You can't avoid that. It's not all about the cold chai you're going to get after. And like all those memes you see that like never walked away from a yoga class feeling bad. And I'm like, really? Like most of my meditations are me going like, like seriously. Yes, you can cry through many yoga classes. Do that, like to feel is what we're here to do. It's to learn not to react so crazy to it. What is really the tangible part of this, what we're working towards. So, yeah.
Last night I was teaching my class at Grace Cathedral, and because of COVID, we have the doors open. There's a big sort of gate in front, like it's beautiful ornate gate, but we let the breeze blow through, so it's almost like being outside. And we're just into our meditation, and someone who I suspect was mentally ill came up to the gate and was like screaming F-bombs and other obscenities. And it's like echoing through the cathedral. And you could see people getting uncomfortable with it, and it was like sort of pissed off, like, hey, I'm trying to meditate in here. And I said, it's just a mantra, right? It's just a mantra. We give that word that power. We give it, it's only dark until you shine light on it and smile at it. And then people sort of laughed, and it was okay. And he left, and the world kept spinning. And no, it's not ideal. I would prefer people not scream F-bombs into my class. But it happened, and it's just a mantra. He was saying it with more passion than most people, say Om Namah Shivaya.
Yeah.
So. Well, we've covered some territory. F-bombs.
I love it.
You need to move to Berkeley. Sri Lanka's too far. We'd be like besties. I know it. Or maybe I'll move to Sri Lanka.
People are throwing F-bombs everywhere here. It's just like a part of the game, in a different way. Usually it's like, la 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 la, in their own language.
I have a friend, I don't know if Sri Lanka is like this, but India for sure, it's like the power goes out constantly, and it's just one big frustrating mess. Like, it's almost like the whole country finds a way to just agitate you, which is good. It's why it's so therapeutic. Instead of trying to make you feel good, it says, let me show you all your buttons, the ones you didn't even know you had. But my friend Shala started a school there for impoverished kids, and it's this amazing school. And I bring groups there, and of course the lights go out and all kinds of stuff. And she started saying every time something frustrating would happen, I love Mother India. And she turned it, like, that became her ritual. Like, instead of saying, oh, God damn it, the power's out, and just shaking her fist and being annoyed, she's like, I love India.
I think
I
you're
love India. I love
onto
Mother
something,
India.
though. I mean, I talk about this actually in the meditation chapter when I talk about my first trip to India, and I was going to be like, turn myself into Krishnamurti. Here I was going to get so enlightened and figure out like everything Gandhi figured out. I was going to figure it out on this 6-month trip. And I had to go lock myself away in my first Vipassana because I wanted to kill everyone. I hated everything. Every tuk-tuk driver I asked for directions, he'd just be like, it's over there, madame. And it wasn't over there. Like, it was not.
Is that a yes or a no?
And so I went and I sat and I talk about the whole journey sitting in that 10-day meditation. And what I realized, when I came out is that like, maybe there's just actually more optimistic, that there's a million ways to get everywhere. So they can point in any direction and send you anywhere because they believe that you can truly get there from any direction. And just to see it differently. And just like she did, even in Sri Lanka, I'll do this all the time. Like, God, like if I keep adding if that's going to be my ritual for living here, I'm going to go crazy. So it really makes it you have to be strong in your effort to catch it because it's not super convenient. I mean, even my son, when we were in the States, was like, so Mom, there's like no power cuts here. And I was like, I know it's crazy, right? But like, if we are going to get upset every time there's a power cut, what kind of existence is that going to be for us? Expecting it to be just like it is in the West. I mean, expecting these dogs, the whole pack of street dogs outside to be quiet just because I'm on an interview. mean,
Don't they know you're a famous author?
oh,
Don't you know who I am?
so you make it or you break it yourself. It's just so obvious and clear that, and we can do that anywhere we are.
Well, yeah. Well, I think one of the downsides to being privileged, and we are profoundly privileged here in the West, even those who are not so privileged have much more privilege than most places on Earth. One of the downsides is it's so easy to get caught up in condition-based happiness.
Yes.
Right? I'll be happy when I make more money, when I find the perfect spouse, when your book becomes a bestseller, whatever it is. And when you're just like, when happiness is like, yay, I ate today, then all of a sudden it's like, okay, I can settle in, I can be content, and I can be grateful for what I have. And it's so hard. I'd like to think there's a happy medium there, like that poverty is not so glamorous either. But yeah, I think
There's a
something to be
simplicity
said
with
for.
poverty also, though, and from my experience, maybe that's why I've chosen to live in developed countries, because they bring it back down, that opera gaia, right? That's simplifying, minimizing, and letting life be so much easier and even though it's difficult for them and people here right now, it's incredibly difficult. You would know. I mean, you would know because sometimes there's more theft than normal, but all my friends, they've spent their whole savings. My local friends, here have spent their whole savings in these 2 years, but they still come over here offering me gifts. It's just such a different way of being. And yeah, when you don't have everything as you want it to be, it's well, that's really life. And so maybe that's why they say people in our more developed worlds are actually becoming more depressed and more anxious and more stressed and having things like IBS and Crohn's.
Autoimmune diseases.
Yes.
Most autoimmune diseases are only in the developed world, and it's because we're just sort of bored and our immune system is finding a way to entertain us.
Yes. And not processing any emotions or whatever, holding things in, not talking about those. So many things that we do in the West, like always have a smile, where here too, if the lady across the street's upset, everybody knows, there's no secrets. The village knows everything. So even with me, it's just, and that.
Are you the lady across the street in this story?
I just might be. But
have you heard that we need to wrap this up? I could talk to you for days, but have you heard the Mother Teresa thing where she was asked if she could give an example of the ideal Christian, somebody who really embodies Christianity? And she told this story, and for people who aren't familiar, in India, the Muslim and the Hindu communities, there's a huge amount of tension. They typically, not everyone, of course, but there's just a lot of tension. They don't typically get along. And she said she heard this family didn't have enough to eat, so she brought them a bag of rice. And it was a Hindu family, and she immediately cut it in half and walked across the street and gave it to her Muslim neighbor. And she said because they're hungry too. And she said that was true Christianity, and there wasn't even a Christian in the story. And I think you see a lot of that. You bring it down to that basic level of I am human, you are human. We both get hungry. We both need sleep. We both need safety. We all need love. We all need to be cared for.
And to look at our relationships that way, like at the end of my, marriage with my husband, I don't think we were seeing each other in that light anymore. It wasn't, you were a soul growing on this human journey and you're having a hard time. It was, why are you doing this to me? And really not, like you just said, seeing the other people as also on their own independent journey. That's been something I've just done a lot of work with recently. So I, bring that up, but it's so easy to see it with people we don't know. And even the rules of yoga, when you look at the yamas, it's so easy, be kind, ahimsa. But like, we're talking about to yourself often and to the people closest to you, like everyone's like, I have so much compassion. I work at the food bank. And I'm like, but are you compassionate to your mom who was a total, what growing up? Like we have to really dive deep in that. And to Mother Teresa was such a legend in that way. And Christians are. The Christianity is like such a beautiful example of how to be more compassionate. And I do believe that is the religion of compassion. And Jesus just walked around helping and healing, and what a guru or a yogi he was also. Yeah. And
the bumper sticker that says, "Dear Jesus, please protect me from your followers." But I think there's a relation. I see a similarity between how yoga is so often practiced, and I was raised Catholic, and that there were people who would go to church on Sunday, and it's like they check that box, and then they could go be an asshole the rest of the week because I've been saved. I go to church on Sunday, and I think we in yoga tend to do that. It's like, well, I did my yoga, now I can go live my life as if I checked that off my to-do list, as opposed to your approach, which is if you have a heartbeat, if you're breathing, it's an opportunity to do yoga.
Yes. And what did people think, that just because you can't get to your yoga mat, like handicapped people or my 80-year-old grandma, because she can't move in that way, suddenly you're not going to get enlightenment? Actually, you're more likely to get enlightenment if you can't get on that yoga mat, and if you're a jerk, like I said before, like you really need to get out the door and you yell at your husband because you need that yoga time and you're clinging to it that way. It might be better for you to give it up for a little bit even, you gotta get like relaxed and let there be more ease with all of this, especially when it's like religious, fundamentalism in our own brains and minds. So I love that bumper sticker though.
Are you going to yoga so you can eventually have a career with Cirque du Soleil, or are you going to yoga because you want moksha or liberation from the prison of your own mind? Yes. And those are two very different goals. And
which is great. That's exactly the point of my book, is I really want people to understand what their goal is, what their time on the yoga mat. It doesn't have to be a yoga mat, but I'm going to just say that, like, their space and their place in that time. Yeah. And if you come, some days I come to my yoga mat and I just study astrology with my computer on my yoga mat, because that day I need to remember that there is divinity. There's something cosmic going on, because I forgot. Because I forgot that the big picture of everything. I forgot that, like, this book isn't about me making $1 million. This book is just a fruit for the gods. They just asked me to write it. And so I did. I kind of channeled some stuff, and I'm just an everyday human. I'm not some kind of liberated guru. I'm like a girl that's also might be standing at the gate of your yoga class throwing F-bombs some days. Like, I have no superpowers, but yet I do.
That was you last night. I thought you looked familiar.
Don't tell anyone. But I want people to realize what they're practicing for. And for years, I was the Cirque du Soleil girl. I mean, I could get my leg all the way around, and I would injure myself because I was so dedicated to that goal. And in the end, what was I doing? I have super flexible hips now, fabulous. But now I still had my debilitating anxiety. So, like, what is most important to me? And so really figuring out what's most important for you and using this 8-step ladder to help you get that. Yeah. And that when you manifest that, I believe that is samadhi with seed. That is what we're working with. And when you learn to manifest, maybe in the beginning it was the leg behind my head, and maybe 20 years later it was this book. But maybe in 10 years, I'll sort the cycle out enough to figure out my own enlightenment. That's what I'm hoping for. And so realizing that has given me a spiritual confidence. And I hope that the readers get that, and how they look at yoga completely different as the big picture of the system, and that all the 8 principles are equally as important. And do most people even know what they are? How many yoga classes have you been to? Well, tell me the 8 steps real quick. Not because I want you to study, but to know that you understand, like, it's not just about the physical.
My book, the Urban Mystic book, Yoga and the Path of the Urban Mystic, has been out for 20 years. And the whole second part is about the 8 limbs. And it's interesting, I've been going around speaking for more than 20 years on this subject, and people are like, oh my God, how did you learn this? I'm like, that's sort of like saying, how does a Christian learn about the golden rule? I mean, it's like, it's sort of, the 8 limbs are sort of like the Beatitudes of yoga. And to not, like, I'm not saying everybody should read the Yoga Sutras on day one, but it just seems like it's a good idea to pick up the Bhagavad Gita, the Yoga Sutras, maybe even the Pradipika at some point, and just flip through it and see what's in there, because it's such powerful wisdom. It's like the missing manual.
Or even modern day transcriptions, like not transcriptions, but translations of that. People who are living modern lives with these principles deeply ingrained, like your book, or hopefully, my book as well,
Your
or
book is
Eckhart Tolle's
like
books.
A classic, I guarantee it.
Wow.
It's probably going to be a few years
Besties.
before it can be called a classic. But no, I see your book being... it was shocking to me when I wrote my book that anybody read it. I wrote it more for me. But that people teacher training started using it, because it was sort of a bit... There were a lot of books much better than mine in terms of the depth they go. But I think that they can be hard for newer readers. And...
Yeah.
And I think your book, like all of a sudden teacher trainings were using my book, and I was like, oh my God, that's so... I was shocked. And but I see your book as being a really amazing book to help people make yoga philosophy and practice and lifestyle accessible. Because otherwise it's that thing that they did in India in a cave thousands of years ago, and who really cares? But I see your book being a transformational yoga book. I really do.
Thank
you. And it
you.
all started with this podcast.
It did.
I want my commission.
No, it all started with your book. Like I said, before we hit record, your book was actually one of my inspirations on the book proposal. So, I mean, thank you for writing a modern yoga book that made me even know that this path was possible. And like you, I really wrote this for myself. I was actually writing a personal research book on intuition that ended up being like 100,000 words. And I was like, oh, no one's going to want to read this. And then through time, it's become much, much simplified and easy to digest. But yes, I love that. I love both of us.
Well, let's help people find your book.
Okay.
And you do a lot above and beyond your book. So maybe you could say your website, where they can find your book and the different formats it's in, and anything else you'd like to share, social media, anything that would help people get in touch with you or understand your work and your offerings more fully.
Great. Yes, thank you. And because I have it here, and it just came out a week ago, I'm going to show you the cover.
Is it burning your hand? Hot off the press.
All that gold. And it's called Rituals of the Soul, Using the 8 Ancient Principles of Yoga to Create a Modern and Meaningful Life. It's available on Audible, Amazon. Most places books are sold, which is amazing. I feel so grateful to the universe and to my publishing house who's helped me with that. But as far as me personally, I have a website. I call it a gathering place, but it is a website, essentially. And it's called Santosha Society. And in the beginning, I started that to run retreats, and there was like a yoga surf thing going on that before that was really a thing. Now Santosha means contentment. So my idea was that it was really a society, getting a group of like-minded people together to do what we love. And that's what I believe. That's one of the niyamas, the virtues that the yogis wanted us to live by, is to guide ourselves to what makes us happy and to have fiery passion tapas. So because Santosha is contentment. And hopefully if all of us can figure out what rituals work for us, we will become this beautiful society of content and happy people, or not always happy, but content. Because you can be content in your unhappiness, can't you, really?
It's probably my favorite niyama, because it's just this constant reminder that contentment is a practice, not something that is bestowed on us. Like you choose it, and you choose it whether you stubbed your toe or won the lottery. And that's such a revolutionary idea. Here in the West, it's like you'll be content when you get that white picket fence and the attractive spouse and
Job,
the Lexus
partner,
and the
kid.
kids that behave all the time.
Yes.
And good luck with that one.
Yeah. And I have lots of free meditations which actually guide, my main freebie on my website is a 8-day meditation that guides you through each of these principles. I like to call them principles because I feel like limbs is kind of an antiquated word that most people can't relate or resonate with. So I call them principles. And so if you do like the book, I suggest or encourage you to come and try to meditate through those 8 steps too, because that'll just kind of push it a little bit deeper into your unconscious as well. And so that's at santoshasociety.com. I'm also on socials, all the social stuff. So that's easy to find me there with my name.
Kori Hahn, the book is Rituals of the Soul. It's available everywhere books are sold or downloaded, as the case may be. And if you find yourself in Sri Lanka, you can look her up. Or maybe you can, if you
visit.
Have any plans to be in San Francisco, let me know. And maybe we can do an event at the cathedral after one of my classes or something. Or have you be a guest teacher sometime.
Great.
I'd
Yes.
love that.
Yeah, that would be lovely. We do come. I have a van. My mom lives in Southern California. And so I come back and we cruise around in the van usually once a year. Now the world's changing. So yes, that could happen.
Solving Mysteries with Shaggy and Velma.
Sometimes.
Scooby-Doo. Let's end on the Scooby-Doo reference before this devolves into something really unsightly.
Star Wars?
Star Wars is my favorite.
That was on the last interview.
It was so nice to chat with you, and I look forward to chatting with you again. And I say this to a lot of the guests, but if you think of another topic or you want to write another book or whatever, I would love to have you back on just so I get to chat with you again.
Same.
With that, okay.
Thank you. And I wish you lots of peaceful yoga classes without the F-bomb being
Well, it'll keep me on my toes if he shows up again. I'll give him a hug.
Yeah. He probably needs it.
Namaste.